Welcome to the Portland Board of Public Education's operations meeting. It is Thursday, March 4th, and we are meeting via Zoom. And Superintendent, could you please take attendance?
Ms. Thompson?
Here.
Mr. Irish?
Here.
Mr. Youssef?
Here.
Great. We're all here. I've never taken attendance at a committee meeting.
Oh, no.
3 people. And then we have our distinguished staff with us today, too. Mr. Stilfen.
Good evening, everybody.
Mr. Sherwood.
Good evening, everyone.
Mr. Buzier.
Yeah, Greg. Hello. Thank you, Greg. Thank you.
And Mr. Henry. I don't even know how to pronounce your last name, Henry. Guillaume?
It's Guillaume. The D is silent.
Guillaume. Okay. I can't believe that I've never actually said your name out loud with your last name. So this is great, Sarah. Thanks for getting me to that realization.
I figured you might want to do the roll call. So, all right. So moving into approval of minutes for February 4th. Do I have a motion? Mr. Irish, seconded by Mr. Youssef. Are there any questions, errors, or omissions? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor? Okay. It's unanimous with all those present. And moving into business items, we have the CIP backlog, and I'll turn it over to the superintendent. Thank you.
So we have 2 agenda items today. One is the CIP backlog, and the other one is just a bit more discussion around the start and end times revisions in that process. So that's what we have today. The CIP backlog, Mr. Stilfen and Mr. Sherwood are here to help us work through this. If you recall, we talked about this being one of the priorities for the operations committee this year to help us to get all of our CIP projects on track. We just, as you know, approved the submission of this year's CIP. And so the reason we made that smaller is because we have about $9 million worth of CIP projects that are currently not scoped out entirely, are not in process. So we think that's a priority. So Mr. Stilfen and Mr. Sherwood have worked to develop a plan for that, and we wanted to share that with the committee today and have a discussion about it so that we can, have your guidance as we move forward in trying to operationalize that. So I don't know if you all have access to this file. If not, I could, I could share it on the screen, whatever.
That would be great if you could share it. Yeah, that'd be great. I have it on the screen, but a large audience join us.
There's nobody with us right now, but hope springs eternal. So we could potentially have somebody at some point. And plus, we do videotape this, so I think it'll help people who are watching this in delay. I think people binge watch these, so they say I can't wait for my summer vacation. I'm going to catch up on all of my operations committee meetings, and they go and they just binge watch one after the other, sort of like I did with Breaking Bad. So. Okay, so this is where we are right now. So can you see that? Is that on the screen? Okay. So let me just guide you to the way that we've organized these. So there's a set of projects here that are all of the ADA projects. And so you see each project horizontally is the city's project number, the school, what the project entails, the current estimate for that, and the status, and then some comments. And then what the team did was they pulled these into basically related packages. And so this first one is all the ADA projects. The second one, same thing, horizontally, these are all fire safety packages. Here you have all of these, they're called building envelope projects. And then another set that are the ones that I just showed you are the HVAC projects. These are the building envelope projects here. And then there's more of a miscellaneous category, which they've named other. So I think what would probably make the most sense, Steve and Doug, is for you to walk through what the sort of the big picture of everything that's in here, what those projects are all, what they all are, and then the way that you're thinking about moving those forward. So let's start, with the first, I think just walk all the way down. So let's start with the ADA projects, and then we'll move on to the next set. Does that make sense? Any questions from the committee before we get started walking through those?
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
On the ADA, are you going to talk a little bit about the revolving fund?
So those are in here. So yes, I believe
good.
we're going to do that.
All right,
So.
thank you. I'll be quiet.
Okay, Steve or Doug, who's?
Yeah, I'd just like to say that the SRR, or the Revolving Fund, are the ADA projects. I apologize. I thought I had modified the spreadsheet.
You know what? You probably did, and I have not updated it, so that's my bad. Doug, would you mind sending it to me, and then I will. I'll get that and update it. But we can start with this, and then as soon as I get it updated, I'll show that instead.
So when we look at this, I'm going to have Doug walk through the titling of the spreadsheet, but with exception of the SRRF or the ADA, in some cases, in all cases, we picked them from the assessment from Sebago Technics that were identified in our assessment report of 217. And then our approach here, as Doug will walk through this, had been to find commonality in scope, like ADA calls out, in the areas of HVAC as well as building envelope, and try to match trades and consolidate and move packets of RFQs, bringing the procurement process down to 5 RFQs to represent these goalposts and markers that we can evaluate as we get into the detail to the procurement in each of these areas. So hand in glove method of trying to maximize the labor that we put forward in the timeframes for which we put them forward to get the maximum impact to completion on each of these projects. And that's what will be reflected in the comment section here. And a reminder that there are goalposts and markers that we want to assess for the ability to start and complete these projects to eradicate this backlog that's occurred over some time. So Mr. Sherwood, if you don't mind, sir.
Very good. Again, welcome everyone. The Group 1 projects, as the superintendent said, is all of our American with Disabilities Act projects from FY19 through FY21 in this particular setter group. All the project numbers that start with C21 are actually state revolving renovation fund supported projects, which total approximately $1.9 million that were in last year's CIP. So we've got not just local board support and the council support, but also state support for the funding of these particular initiatives. The 2 earlier projects we packaged together to competitively select through a qualification process. Scott Simon's Architects here in Portland to review and assess and design these particular projects. I met with the project manager this morning. Steve and I will be meeting with them, the team next week, and going through actual designs or options for solutions to all of these problems that you see listed. Lincoln Middle School, the primary concern is, and always has been, how does someone easily access the main entrance to the building? And is the main entrance where we want everybody to enter? So it's a somewhat of a challenging aspect to address. There are other aspects within the building where we need to improve accessibility as well. As you go further down, there's door hardware and restrooms at Casco Bay Paths. We've got door hardware, handrails, counters, and restroom issues at Deering High School. More than likely, some of those solutions may be similar to what we have at a few of our schools. In the case of Moore Middle School, most recently, we altered a previously gender-specific restroom that was open profile to an actual open wall, gender-neutral single-stall entries. And we may find that we'll do the same thing here at Deering to increase privacy, but also safety and health as it responds to managing and watching and controlling different things that happened at school. We have ramps at King as well as handrails. We might even also look at possibility of getting from the center stairwell off of Park Avenue up and down to the first and second floor. At Moore Middle School, very, very tight accommodations in the nurses area that we hope to expand and create a much more viable working and management situation, and then some improvements in the locker room for privacy and access. Talbot, previously at Riverton, a number of issues, and it should say sinks and counters, not sunks and counters. In most of the classrooms do not comply with ADA. They're also been listed in the assessment report as items that need to be changed due to their age and wear. And then at Portland High, primarily the focus is things outside the building, curb cuts, detectable warning strips, handrails inside, and a locker room renovation. So Scott Simons has been working on this for about 3 or 4 months now. We're hoping to have a plan of action mid to late next month so that we can get a lot of this work underway, as school gets out and come close, if not on target, to the state deadline for the state revolving renovation fund projects.
Doug, when is that? What's that deadline?
It's the end of summer. We might not meet some of those targets, but when we have the actual dates for the projects being ready out to bid and have contractors in place, we'll be revisiting with our folks at facilities team at Maine Department of Education as to an extension if needed.
And do we expect that would be granted?
It has in the past. And from talking with other architects working on similar projects in this year group, they are sensing the same thing. A brief conversation I had with Ann Panette, who's the project director at facilities, was that they would entertain it, but they want to make sure that there's a guarantee that the work's completed. That's why we want to make sure that we have our designs in hand and a contractor at work.
Yeah.
Any questions from committee members?
I have a question. What is SRRF project stands for?
The
State Revolving Renovation Fund.
Oh, thank you.
So just as an opportunity to sort of fill you in on that, that is a state program that is funded through bonds that the state puts out to do specific types of school renovation projects. The year that we got this funded, so last year, they made funds available. This year, they did not make any funds available. We had also, a couple years ago, had some additional projects that we were able to do using state renovation funds. So it depends on when they retire enough debt that they have room to give additional grants. that's where, so that is that's how this program works. And so we got about almost $2 million in state money for ADA projects. And so those are, Americans with Disabilities Act, so accessibility issues in schools. And so they prioritized that type of project and life safety projects. Those are the only things that they prioritized in the year. So we took advantage of that, thought of a number of different ADA projects that we would otherwise have in our city CIP and applied for it and got the funding for it. And now we just got to get them done.
Thank you.
And then the Lincoln, you explained the Lincoln project. What's the multiple, Doug? The second one, which is not a school, a state revolving renovation fund.
Yeah, it was not school unique. It was an open item back from that same fiscal year 2019 to identify certain work. And I think in the initial definition that we gave, there may have been projects listed here. So we're revisiting the specific items that be addressed, but we wanted to make sure that we fully designed and accounted for estimates for the work that was in 21 to make sure that we would have enough money to execute all of them. So we haven't fully addressed that particular line yet.
Great.
Any other questions? Okay, go ahead.
Are we ready to move on, folks? Okay. So the second set of projects are the fire safety.
Correct. So we have a number of projects in the facilities assessment where most of our systems are becoming end of service life or obsolete. The systems at Moore and King were rated the highest, so hence they were processed back in 2019 into the system, along with the fact that with the exception of a very small area of common space in the gym addition in 1982, Deering has no fire sprinkler system at all. So this would be a first time to get inside the building and do what needs to be done to provide appropriate coverage. It would also require us to provide probably additional water service to the building or pressure to the building anyway. So it is something that needs to be fully designed. We have two projects, a little bit smaller scale because it's a smaller building, though it's one of our older buildings, Peaks Island Elementary School. And we have a prior year project at Peaks Island Elementary, you'll see in the lower part of the list, that we'll probably combine with these two projects to go forward. But the main thrust of trying to get this group of fire systems together is that the technology is very unique. The services are getting a little bit more open infrastructure. So we're hoping to take advantage of the changes and upgrades in technology to get more state-of-the-art equipment and to standardize that equipment as we install it in the building. So the intention is to get some not just economies of scale and benefit of just it, but have similar standardized equipment that we can maintain long-term in the case of Moore, King, and Peaks Island Elementary.
And along with that, I'd just like to add, with operations in our standard mode, we're looking at, right now we have 3 different vendors with different priority systems, which gets really a lot of confusion in the periodic maintenance. So consolidating the life safety groups together under one vendor supplier oversight and repair, and of course maintenance and testing. So that's part of that thought process and consolidation of life safety issues and systems.
So, and what's the plan then with these projects?
The plan from Doug. Go ahead, Steve.
No, do you mean by when we intend to start these plans?
Mm-hmm. So what needs to happen? Because to me, I feel like, okay, we should just order the fire alarm system replacements from Amazon. They'll be here, on Friday or, on Monday of next week, and then we can get them installed by Friday of next week, right? So that's what we're doing?
No.
No?
In the part of this grouping, and use the terminology again, hand in glove, we would look to build 5 RFPs, which combine within them the scope, the layout, the design, the engineering, the maintenance vendor who would be pulled in under the priority panel from Norris to Honeywell, get our whole district-wide under a consolidated system that may only have 2. So in that RFP, working with hopefully bringing in the La Valley Brensinger or someone like that to look at this in a consolidated way, review back to the assessment, pull the full scope and detail and package them together as that RFP hits the street. And then we can make the definition to say a predominant panel is a Norris panel, not a Cunningham panel or so forth, and try to pull the district tighter together under that consolidation. So those would be the aspects that we would pair and get on the street and control through the RFP process at a real detailed level for systems to integrate to our district, and then also, of course, to set the scope for the procurement.
So the next step is for us to contract with an engineer, right? An engineer, architect, and engineering firm to build out the specifications. So it's similar to what we did with the school renovation projects. We hired Harriman. Harriman is building all the specifications, and then we're about to put out a bid that people will then say, like, I can do these 5 fire and technology upgrades for X number of dollars, and we'll take those who can, we'll take the lowest bidder, right? That's how it works.
That's how it works. It wouldn't be the same amount of information for each one of these projects individually, but in total of 3. And then as we talk about combining, when we do the fire sprinkler, we have money in CIP will identify for renovation of the space in the classroom. Well, if I'm going to rip the ceiling apart and run sprinkler system for the walls and an updated burglar system, I'm going to follow it up with a renovation money, hand in glove that process in the combined RFP. It allows us to layer and schedule and manage our interruptions to our programmatic to the schools, so that we can control that process from the layering of each within the one to get the system completed with the renovation at the final part, rather than looking at go out for renovation, painter, drywaller, flooring, upgrades to electrical. We can combine. We're going to be in there doing some demo for this project. Let's combine this. They get done with their work. We layer it in on schedule, and it's a continuum of schedules of these trades together.
And the plan then would be to do the work with La Valley Brensinger, and we're thinking them because they're a city approved engineering firm, so we don't have to go out to bid for that. We can just contract with them, and they know, because they did the facilities assessment, they know these projects already, so they're ideally positioned to do that.
Exactly, Javier. And if you look through the survey and you read to where they're coming up with their assessment for costs, they're very general. They're not, in some things we can accept the generalization and get to an RFP with some of that information, but it's generalized. So to really develop the scope to integrate trades is important. And that's why, for our capacity and availability to really get these projects on track from start to finish, it is what we need to do. And that will then clear in a period of time. And again, these are goalposts, as we talked about over the last week, Javier, that they're wherever there's an opportunity where we can not go as deep into an RFP for many reasons. We can do by guaranteed maximum and have a generalized replacement of the remaining windows that we spoke about. And we don't need to cover as much liability in an RFP that we would normally look at a deeper, in-depth type of systems, and especially with life safety systems. And Doug alluded to the issue, the 1 million for Deering. We're going to have to bring a water main to augment Deering High School. We're going to have to dig across Stevens Avenue to set a new supply to sprinkle that building. So there's permitting, there's scheduling, there's people who drive up and down that street, and to integrate and overlay working from the inside out to connect back in. So there's that kind of tightness. We need to have real in-depth scope to the RFP. With the windows and continuation from where we were in the pandemic. And
We're going to get to the windows in a minute, right?
it's a different thing. So yeah, so that's the approach.
Okay. Any questions? Okay. Let's move then to the HVAC project.
Okay, so project group number 3, heating, ventilating, air conditioning, which has become a primary issue for all of us as we've entered the COVID era. We did a number of things in the systems during the first months of this particular school year with cleaning out unit vents, installing ionizers, and also installing air purifiers and other devices, a little bit distractive. But our biggest project on this list from the 20-year group was to replace air handling unit on the new section of Deering High School that supports the gym and other support elements in the first and second floor in that building. Our bids last summer came back $200,000 over budget. Bids were open this week, and we have a successful bidder, DeMatteo Construction, and they will hopefully be starting, organizing for setup and permits and submissions as early as next month, and hope to complete the project before school starts in August. So one success story in the package here. There's a smaller project at Deering that they're hoping to augment later in the summer using a different contractor. And then we have those next 3 you see in the middle, the 50-ton AC unit at Talbot and 2 smaller rooftop unit configurations at Lincoln and Portland High that will hopefully be designed this summer for installation next summer.
We should update this on the spreadsheet. Doug?
Yes, we just got it. Yes.
Yeah.
Any questions? Okay, keep going.
The building envelope.
Building envelope group 4 is that we've carried these kind of terminology and the building envelope in project 4 in our CIP messages to this city manager and the council. So we carry through that same format. Again, work having to do with improving ventilation allowed us to make some investments at Portland High, Deering, Talbot, and Longfellow this past fall. So we've had prototypes of the types of windows that could go or should be going into those buildings as the repairs are being done. But they were done, I use the term, on the fly, maybe even on the run, to get things in place. We had to coordinate with manufacturers, get items delivered, get some repairs made. Some of it went into the school year. Very challenging time, but we really need to bring the architect or engineer back to kind of do the required field work, set up for the appropriate production. But at least we have ahead of us, at least in the case of Portland High and Deering, our reviews by the city on historic preservation. They're good to go as far as the style and frame. So it's just getting the legwork done and getting the projects out on the street. So we're hoping to use that list again, the approved city list, to identify the architect engineer. It could be LaValle Bressinger again, to get these projects designed and get things set up for installation in the summer of 2022. Some of this work could be done during the school year, but we found through our process with the smaller group of windows that it's very challenging to to work around the building, around students, around getting items in and out, whether it's removing the old or putting in new with an occupied building. So we'll probably get a much better economy of scale and bid if we're looking at doing this work in the summertime. Towards the bottom, you see two masonry projects. One is work that was identified as urgent in the facility assessment for pieces of the brick infrastructure on the old side of Talbot that were not restored during the renovation and expansion back in 2007. And most recently, and certainly most urgent, we had some small pieces of the cast stone over the main entrance at Deering come down. I believe it was late November, around Thanksgiving time. We picked those pieces up. We went back up, removed all the loose or soon to be loose items, had a formal assessment done, and we have a pretty good definition of work to go out in an emergency here once we have the council approval to get this work done at Deering, hopefully this summer. It's very urgent and certainly a significant safety issue.
Can I ask a question that I should have asked you guys before? And why, if the Talbot one is, was already approved, and why do we need to go out for design services on that one, but we don't have to do design services on the DHS one, which is a more expensive project?
It's a function of the classification of the work. You have a situation of health and safety warranted. We could still go out, but it's in our best interest to get the work restored before any further damage occurs. In the case of Talbot, it should not be that particular case. But we could certainly get it designed too. But the interest, at least that I have, and I believe Mr. Stilfen has, is to get the work at Deering shored up and moving forward as quickly as possible as an emergency.
And how it's identified in the assessment is vague. Frost wall crack, not depth indicated, not moisture mitigation indication. And I've gone and looked at it. And when you're looking at in a prior time, seeing these repairs, to my eye, in my experience, that yes, it should be investigated, but I'd like to get some engineering on it before I start looking below the frost line on a backside of a wall. And that information is not indicative of what the scope could turn out to be in the assessment.
And so the 100,000 for Talbot, that's for the design services and the masonry work. Is that how much we have?
Yes.
Okay. So it can't be a very big project.
No, I don't think it is.
It is a big project, or it isn't?
No, I don't think it is, Harvey. I think it needs to be investigated by Knowles, a company like that, with a hydraulic review of the foundation under the ground there. There was some caulking or chalking indication. There's no visible large cracks or anything. There's no water getting into the building. But with pointing to the brick wall under the foundation, they indicated that it should be repaired. But I can't find where $100,000 of a repair is by what they've indicated and what I've seen. So I would like to get it investigated and then know the scope and then understand the cost to repair. But I don't see any real issues that are causing anything structural or impacting the interior of the building.
Yeah. All right. And then last but not least, the other category.
Other category. We have a series of projects that don't fit well into our defined groupings from above. We have been investing over the last 5 to 10 years a fair amount of money in restoring pavements, King Middle School parking lot, the roadway and surfaces and parts of the parking lot for the Arts and Technology High School. Most recently, the entranceway and area into more Lyseth campus, and then all the way around the building at Lyseth as part of the project there. And then this was going to be the next round of projects. So we need to get the design agent on board and setting up this next set of projects to be executed. We also have, and I think those who are familiar with the area have significant issues in the foundation of the retaining wall along Cumberland Avenue in front of Portland High School. Different sections at different times have been changed or replaced. We're now starting to lose the footing for the anchors into the concrete along the iron rails. So we have removed sections that we determined to be unsafe and just need to get back in and restore it to its original historic character.
Doug, I have a question about that. The iron railings, wasn't that something that the historic preservation said that we could not do, or that we had to do it in a certain way? I know you said there was something about that. I remember the historic preservation was. Yeah,
they want us to restore it in original iron character. You know, if not actually iron itself, certainly in the presentation that it was.
Okay.
So there are some features within that we need to retain. Something similar to what you'd see in the masonry at Deering, where you have molds and other features that they want to restore or keep the character. And the same thing came with Deering and Portland windows and the way the windows themselves open and the breaks in the panes and that sort of thing that we need to maintain from the original context of the wood frame structures.
And that's something also. Is that something also that we need for them to approve or look at, or to make sure we meet that, or how does that work?
Yeah, they would review the final design to accept before we go to contract the city.
Okay, thank you.
We were close to beginning this process. We worked with the Historical Society on the windows, as Doug spoke to, and we were looking at the front steps and also the retaining wall, the fence, and we just were getting into it when the pandemic whacked us. And so whether it needs to, in the research that they had done to forge the fence back to the historic date of Portland High School is not what they're requiring us to do, but in kind, in style and height, we're pretty much where we were. So, and we looked at the Chestnut Street side, Piedmont to the stairwells, the front stairs, the fencing around, and the interior steps down into the basement level. So we were working to put that in process just prior to the pandemic.
Thank you. Any questions, Jeff or Yusuf?
Anything else you want to say about these others? What about the door access controls projects? 2 out of 5 phases, 3 out of 5 phases. So, but.
Yeah, this year we had hoped to, in late summer, early past fall, they actually execute the second phase of 5 phases, but we stepped back to be focused on getting ready for classes in the fall of 2020 with COVID. So we've got more focused on ventilation and other aspects of safe return to school, self distancing, furniture, and so forth. So we deferred action on Lincoln and King, but as part of the CARES Act and the emphasis that we had on outdoor learning, we were able to execute through CARES one of those particular projects, and that's more middle school. So we didn't have a year without, but we had a year with less, so to speak, this past summer. having to do with door access controls. The drainage work has been a concern for runoff between Longfellow and Deering for a number of years now, and some issues that it creates for the fields down behind Deering as well. With the Longfellow project moving forward and there being some site work off the back of Longfellow, whether it's just the addition of the classrooms or also possibly the cafeteria and warming kitchen, we didn't want to have some work get done and then get undone or need to be redone. So we're going to try and dovetail this work in with the Longfellow expansion and renovation work, which would probably be mid-project, would make it summer 2022. After all the site work is dug out, so to speak.
Okay. Any questions, Jeff or Yusuf? Okay. Seeing none. Do you have anything further on this, Superintendent?
No. So we just wanted to make sure that we shared what our plans are, and we will proceed forward with these plans and keep you updated on any changes. And definitely, the committee is tracking or the goals of the committee tracking the completion of these projects, which is headed for the summer. So we will keep you updated on that. And as we move forward with the design services and things along those lines, just let you know if anything is off schedule.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Steve, and thank you, Doug.
All right. Steve, Doug, you're welcome to stay, or you can call it a night.
Thank you, sir.
Yep. Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Javier, I'm going to go have dinner. Thank you, everybody.
Good night, Doug. Good night, Steve.
All right. Good night.
Chair Figdor has joined us. Do you want me to take attendance for her?
No, I think we're good. You can keep going. She's a bonus.
All right. So what the second item on the agenda is to talk about the start and end times, sort of, what we should or shouldn't do around that. At Chair Thompson's request, I went back and had people digging through, what happened before and trying to get a sense of all of that. So we'll spend a little bit of time talking through some of those documents that are in there. And we also, the PEA, as part of the ongoing work that they're doing to sort of gauge where people are, did a start time survey of their membership. And so I wanted to just spend a minute on that, because I think that, it sort of illustrates the complexities of doing this work. So, sorry, because I just lost my connection for a second.
That's right. Jeff is going to sing us a tune while we wait.
There it is. So this is the survey. This is part of a larger survey we did, asking a number of things about the calendar and the schedule. But this one is which most accurately reflects your position on changing the starting and end times, and given the specifics that we would move the elementaries to 7:30 or 8:15, and middle school starting at 9, and high school starting at 9. And so you can see the the very inconclusive feedback that we got from that. And I think that is one of the things that we need to be prepared for as we move into something like this, is that, it's roughly a third, and a third. A third that says, I don't like it. There's a third that says I support it. And then there's another group that's, undecided or doesn't really care. So, I think that is it's one of the challenges that we face in doing this work. Sarah, I don't know if you saw Emily's hand is up.
Sure. Emily, go ahead. I was going to hold some questions, but go ahead.
I was just wondering if any context was provided as to why we would move start times, or if this was it in terms of how we contextualized it.
And I think that, we're dealing with educators. I think everybody is very familiar with the science around this. So I don't think that is, I don't know. It wasn't my survey, so I don't know exactly what context was provided. But I just, this is something that people understand. It's not like, something that we don't know the science around, the rhythms, the internal clocks of students.
Thank you. Javier, I have a question on that too. Do you foresee that we'll do the same exact survey to parents anytime soon? We did one before.
I think this is part of what we want to, that is part of what I want to talk about. I'm going to actually share with you some of what was done before. So I which is not very, so anyway. So I just wanted to start with this. So, and I saw Mr. Yusuf's hand was also up.
Yeah, my question was part of Ms. Thompson's question. Who is the population of the survey? Was it parents?
This was teachers. This was 121 teachers. So also to put that in context, we have, somewhere in the neighborhood, actually it's not just teachers, this was members of PEA. So it's teachers and ed techs, but not all of them are members of PEA that receive this. But, sort of ballpark, it would be roughly, 800 to 900 people that, would have potentially answered this, and 121 responded. So, I'm not, saying this is representative. I'm not saying this is, this is definitive in any way. I'm just, I think that it's important as the board, as the committee considers moving forward in this direction, understanding that this is not one of those things where you're going to have 85% of the people saying, I like this way. You're going to have, sort of close to an even split. So it really, don't expect that people are just going to be like, oh, this is great, we should just do it. So, so to sort of further illustrate that, let me see. So in 2015, the school board went through an exercise on this, and I'm trying to think what is the best of these documents to, maybe I have it open already. No.
Maybe the public hearing?
That's just the calendar of the where's the memo?
I apologize. I've been meaning to pull out my bag of goodies, but I haven't done it yet.
Okay, we went and saved you from having to do that.
Oh, I've got plenty more.
Yeah, we have plenty more too. So that's feel free to go and dig for it. I don't have a problem with that. Let me just stop sharing here for a second and share now this. Do you see a memo here? Or are you seeing yourselves? What do you see?
A memo.
The memo. So to make a long story short, when you read this memo, which is a part of your packet, what you learn is that the school board wanted to make the changes in the beginning and end times for the secondary schools, and that it did not work. And so instead, what the school board wound up doing was making, some changes to the start times at the elementary schools in order to enable a more efficient transportation of students, but kept the middle schools and the high schools. There is here, actually, no, this isn't the one. there's a memo from Manny to the school board, which I thought was Manny Hvac, the former superintendent, that I thought was the best document for this. Where is that?
While you're looking,
I'm not sure that was.
I think that
I'm not.
the 20 minutes that's showing up here, the new bell schedules are necessary to accommodate 20 more minutes. That's interesting that shows up here too. You know, the conversation we had back along about adding more time for in-person learning. But Emily, did you have a question?
I'm not sure I saw that in board docs. I looked through the documents earlier.
It's not. That's why I'm saying that. So there's two documents. Do you see this document now? No, you don't. Oh, darn.
I think it's before the last one, where it says the bail is scheduled for most elementary school, 2 middle schools.
There's another. So there's two documents that I want to show you. First, this is a memo from Superintendent Hvac talking about no, this is the wrong one. I'm sorry. There's just too many things here. This is the one.
Could you make that a little bigger when you're done? Thank you.
I've been meaning to go and get these into board docs all day, and I just haven't had a minute to do that. So, so this was in 2015, and this is the conclusion. Actually, this is not it either. I'm sorry.
In case you do have a plethora.
Javier, can I ask, just as you're looking for that, one of the issues that seems to be raised in all these documents is aligning with the ferry schedule. And when we did work on this back now 2 years ago in the operations committee, we did look at that issue, and it wasn't it wasn't the same kind of barrier, right?
I don't remember us looking at the ferry schedule issue. I know the ferry schedule is an issue for the middle schools in particular. So I think I just had a conversation about this with the Long Island superintendent. It's not an issue for peaks, it's an issue for Long. So I think that remains an issue. And I actually have an email somewhere in my email that has the sort of the schedule and what challenge that presents for Long. Small number of kids, no question about it, but it is a problem. So this is the survey, the only piece of the survey that we were able to find. And so I don't have the actual survey. I just have this as, I think, the comments. So there are, several hundred comments that were received. I haven't had a chance to look through them. But that's 850. So I think.
When you're going to post, I'm sorry, Javier, is that one you're going to post to board docs, or can you send it to us?
Yeah, I don't know that this one's going to be super helpful. I can definitely.
It gives a good idea of what feedback was.
Yeah, except it's kind of not really. I don't know what to make out of it. There's no, it's all sort of people's writing. So there's no coding to it. So it's voluminous. There's 850 of these. Where everybody said, what were my top 3 priorities or wishes for a new calendar. I don't know. There doesn't seem to be anywhere where this has all been sort of cataloged and coded in any way to see, what it is that. And I'm assuming just because the way that surveys are done, that it wasn't just an open-ended survey, that there were probably some, questions along the way around, what kinds of, we're thinking of this, what would that do, and things along those lines. But we haven't found that. We haven't found the survey. The only thing that we found was this particular piece of the...
I will look. I'm sorry. I'm going to go to Mr. Irish.
Hi, thanks. Clearly, there's a lot more that I need to know with respect to historical data. Was the first slide that you showed, Javier, with 121 participants? Was that recent? That was
in the last couple of weeks.
Right, and so I did glimpse at one of the opening paragraphs that the previous superintendent's memo that I think you tried to show was working in consultation with the PEA. We've negotiated ... Are we taking the approach of working? Is this a PEA movement, or is this a...
PEA will need to be a part of those discussions. I think what that memo was referring to, that one of the, and I'm sure that Chair Thompson will recall this, one of the moves that precipitated this conversation was the fact that the school district and the Teachers Association had negotiated a longer school day. And so inherent in negotiating the longer school day was that we needed to revisit the beginning and end times of the day, because obviously the end time was going to be, further away from the start time than it was prior to that. So that's specifically what precipitated the need to reopen everything, right? Then in doing it, they also thought, while we're doing this, should we also look at, flipping how things work from the way that they've always been, which is, the middle schools and high schools start earlier than the elementary schools. And that's where they found themselves. And I wish I could find the memo where it basically says, we decided that we wanted to try to start the high schools later, but we really just got too much feedback that.
So if I can, and I would welcome reading, and I'm guilty of not going back historically on board docs to look up that kind of stuff. So, but to the extent you have information you can provide, I would like to hear it. But because when I first heard about this discussion, it related to a science-based discussion on children's education being, they'd be more effective if they had a little bit more, if the school date started longer. But what I'm reading here is that it was more of a staff issue. So I might be separating the two, or
it was logistical in many fronts, Jeff.
Yeah. All right. So it's complex, and I don't mean to get that deep in the roots, but I would welcome any additional correspondence. I clearly need to do a little bit more homework. So
we can get you more information too.
Thank you.
Do you see are you seeing, because I don't know what I'm actually projecting right now. Are you seeing the board docs screen, or are you seeing the memo that's on my?
Seeing the proposed elementary school schedule before the board is as follows.
Okay.
Yeah, see, this is the negotiating part of the 20 minutes longer school day. 46 additional, but that never really took off the right way it was intended.
That's not it. I'm sorry, meant to be much more organized than I am for this.
That's okay. There's a lot of information.
Okay, this is the one. So this is the release. And so it says, however, after parent and staff feedback and a public hearing on April 28th, the board will be voting on a revised bell schedules proposed for middle schools and elementary schools that are responsive to the public input and the board that the board received regarding start and end times for those schools. They plan no further changes. There was, so anyway, in one of these memos, it talks about the fact that there was significant pushback for the high school and middle school schedule changes. So I will try to get this all organized into a timeline, which is what I had hoped to do for today, and I obviously did not get that done. But I've also gone back and talked to our principals, and they still believe that this is the time that we've opened the door with how we've scheduled the school year during COVID, and that this would be the appropriate time for us to attempt to do this. So I think what I really want is for the board to for the operations committee first, and then the board to understand is that, this is going to be controversial, that this is not something that people are just going to go like, oh yeah, that's universally awesome and we should do it. It's going to be something that is going to be, it's going to bring people to board meetings that are going to be, sharing their perspectives and, and all of that. So I just, I think it's the right thing to do. I think that, while it will take a significant amount of time and bandwidth, that, the educators in the system, the educational leaders in the system believe that we should be trying to move this forward this year. And, I'm willing to do it. And I just want to make sure that you are in support of us moving forward with trying to get that work done.
I think Mr. Irish had his hand raised.
As soon as I raised my hand, Javier spoke to my point and addressed it. So I appreciate that.
Always try to be one step ahead in people's head. And
no, I was hoping that this would be a more of a public discussion to what you just addressed, and that we just wouldn't be relying on. I know that opening up 2021 discussion about obviously the lengthy amount of work that you did back in 2015, 2016, or your predecessor. It's going to be a lot of work. So
yeah. I'm going to go to Ms. Figdor, and then I'll make my comments afterwards. Ms. Figdor?
Yeah, I want to encourage us to do this. I think that I hear and agree and understand that it's not going to be without public controversy, but just given the opportunity with COVID throwing everything up in the air, I do think it's a very unique time for us to then come back into the school year in the fall with start times that align to the science. And so, a lot has happened since 2015, since we considered this. So I appreciate the history and I think it's informative, but whether it's the fact that, the sciences continue to evolve, or that other school districts have already made these changes, I think it isn't a static environment that we're in. So I'm very supportive of us moving this forward.
Thank you, Ms. Figdor. I think that my comments would be, we wanted to do it back then in 2015. And regardless of the public pushback, I think to Ms. Figdor's point, it is an opportunity, but at the same time, I do think we are in a limbo phase right now with people being upset about in-person learning, and then to hear that we're going to start talking about start and end times. I think that we really need to be deliberate in engaging people. And so to say we're going to get this done, I know how people are, lately or in the last year or so have wanted to put things through on the quicker side of things. And that works for some things, but something as significant as this, I'm for taking our time and taking a look at the data and talking to people, because if we start just pushing things through because it's an opportunity and everything else is up in the air and we're just seeing what sticks, I think it's going to backfire on us. And we didn't want that to happen last time. We wanted to be methodical. And unfortunately, some of the work kind of got jumbled around a little bit for various reasons we don't need to go into right now. But it wasn't that we didn't want to do it. So the science was there. We had doctors come, and yes, it's improved more and more, but I'm hesitant to push it through for the sake of pushing it through right now. I do want us to do it, but I also want to make sure the community's engaged and the teachers are engaged. And so to say, to start at the fall with this, I think is very aggressive, given the atmosphere we're in currently. So I'm going to go to Mr. Youssef.
Thank you, Chair Thompson. Last week I suggest that if we want to change something, this is the best time to change. But looking at the memos and the conclusion that to keep the time unchanged, and that create force made up various stakeholders to explore challenges and potential benefits possible making. So I think when it comes to high school students, there may be challenges in terms of playing sports and attending after school clubs or holding jobs. So I would put more time into exploring more of those challenges for high schools. That's my suggestion.
As opposed to middle schools.
Say it again.
As opposed to middle schools?
As opposed to middle schools. I'm more flexible time changing with the elementary and middle school as opposed to the high school specifically.
Thank you, Mr. Youssef. Ms. Figdor?
Javier, could we leave high school at 8:30 and adjust the other ones? I mean, I prefer it to be 9, but
Except that high schools don't start at 8:30 now, so.
Portland High does, doesn't it? Okay, my mistake. I thought what time do high schools start? I thought they started at 8:30.
They start at 8,
Okay.
8 to 10. Generally, first bell's at 8, and then they start at 8:10.
Okay, my mistake. Yeah, I mean, I do really want to encourage us to be responsive to the science. I think the science should guide our decisions. And if we can't get it done in time for the fall, then we'll have to, figure out a plan B. But now, I think now is the time to make these changes. It's going to be the least impactful on family, the least disruptive on families if we do it in time for the fall. But yeah, if we engage in a public process and a process with our staff, and we're either getting feedback that it's not going to work, or that it's not going to work on the timeline to implement for the fall, then we can certainly pull back. But I think we need to follow the science. I think we should try to do it in time for implementation this fall.
Okay, great. Thanks, Ms. Victor. Javier, do you have, Superintendent, do you have anything further you want to add at this time? Well, thank you for doing all of that digging. There is quite a bit of information and iterations of.
Yeah. And we've pulled, the surveys that have been done by other districts and some of the national organizations. And, so we have an understanding of some of the, some of the challenges, which are not, not unlike the ones that, that Portland faced when they tried to do it, the last time. So it's going to take a significant amount of work to do this.
And I think from what I recall, and I could be wrong, and I'd have to look at my notes from back then, but I think we were having the conversation too in conjunction with South Portland and Scarborough, and some were able to make little tweaks around the edges. Mm-hmm. But to Mr. Youssef's point, I think one of the biggest thing was the high school, and also not only the sports and the jobs, but the daycare for siblings and the challenges there that are presented. So it was really a wide. It wasn't any one particular group of parents. It was a wide selection, and we got a lot of really good turnout and good feedback from community. So, I mean, to Ms. Figdor's point, if we could pull it off, great. But I don't want to push it through for the sake of pushing it through. I think the science has been there for a while. It's getting more and more prevalent that we should do it. But I always err on the side of I don't want to force something down on somebody without having proper engagement. And I don't think she's suggesting that either. But I think it's really important, especially in light of, right now with COVID. I think people are very tender and very concerned about getting their child back, and let alone starting to talk about start and end times when we don't even have their students in the school. I think that's raise another. I mean, we don't want to burn down the buildings, but I think people will be really ticked off, to be very honest with you, if we start pushing something through. And if we do a deliberate process and we engage people and we are able to, which I know we can, get the students back in the fall, I think people would, if we could bring them along and then the following fall have that process and have it ready to go, people will have more faith back in us. But right now, I don't think there's a strong contingency of people right now that are not happy. And I think that we need to try to do our best to meet the public's needs, but also the science needs. And so I'm going to babble on and on, but I'm going to wrap it up. Mr. Youssef?
I would like to know how change we are doing. Is it an hour? Let's say if we have high schools starting 8 a.m. and we need 6.5 hours during the day, are we thinking about 9:30 or 10 or?
So what we looked at was to move the middle schools and assume that we would move the high schools to starting at 9 o'clock, so that they would go from 9 to 3:30.
Yeah, thank you.
Any final comments or questions for Superintendent? So next steps, Superintendent, from here, continue at our next meeting to discuss this further. And
well, I mean, I think the next step is for us to start to pull together some kind of a survey that we actually, send out and do some, some communication about, what we're looking to do and why we're looking to do it. And then, begin to sort of, bring it back in, survey data tells us this, as opposed to, I don't necessarily think that we have to have a discussion about this unless, you wanted to see the survey or something along those lines. One of the things that, sort of wears on me is we're about to enter the budget process, and, we have too many different communication, major communication tracks that are going on. So I'm sensitive to getting this along with the budget, along with trying to reopen schools, sort of those three things going at the same time. And they're not the only thing, because there's other things that are also, happening. And so, I'm concerned about that. I'm also concerned that this has to be solved quickly. So I think, my priority now would be to get a survey together, get some communication about it and put that out and try to get just some basic data for us to understand where the challenges are. Because, what you will hear from staff is like, if you're going to do it and let me know now so that I can start making plans for, different childcare arrangements and all of those kinds of things. And I think that that's true for families as well. So this isn't, unfortunately, isn't something that we can decide on August 15th for implementation on August 31st. This has to be, like May 1st. To be able to accommodate people's need to know what their schedule is going to be in the fall. The reason that we pass a calendar in the March-April timeframe is because if we don't, people start saying like, I want to know when graduation is because family need to take time off and all of these kinds of things. I need to know when the different breaks are for whatever reasons. So that's the reason that we actually do the calendar now. And it's also why usually as a part of the calendar, we also have the school open and end times. You saw in those memos that this was all happening in May of that, year, but it happened in May because they tried to do something in March, April, and they weren't able to, and they had to change it then in May, and that was really pushing it. So I'm sensitive to the fact that this has to happen. For it to happen for next year, it has to happen soon, or else we have to table it for a year.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Mr. Irish? You got to unmute yourself.
I'm going to mute myself right now. So I'm just wondering, and I'm not trying to, obviously we went through a couple meetings ago. A lot of parents and students were on a different topic, were expressed their concerns. And to Sarah's point about the importance of this topic has obviously historically been contentious. And I'm just wondering whether or not, given the time frame that you just outlined, that we're looking at 2 months, putting together a survey, addressing concerns, bringing it to the board. Is this not something that, we're dealing with a lot of issues right now, particularly the budget coming up. Is this not something that should be shelved? And I don't know whether or not, I obviously don't have the capacity to ask for that, but given the complexity of everything that's going on, we got teachers now being green-lighted for vaccinations. I think we have a lot of things going on right now to try to address a potential schedule change in a matter of 2 or 3 months. And not to say we shouldn't put in the work. I'm fine with that. I don't know that it would necessarily be accurate work at this point.
Yeah, I'm less concerned about the accuracy part. I think we can do it accurately. I do think that, I know exactly what you're saying and, struggle with that and, brought it to principals and said, like, guys, you think this is the time to be doing this, given everything else that we're trying to message and communicate? And they feel strongly that, that we should do this and that this is the time because the opportunity is there. So that's what's driving me is, that this opportunity exists. But I also am, I know exactly what you're saying in terms of, our ability to dedicate the time and energy to it to be able to pull it off at a time that we've got so many other competing priorities. So honestly, I feel like we should give it a try. We should see if we can get a survey out. We can see if, what the survey tells us and, the degree to which we have the bandwidth at the point that we get that survey back. If we decide then to table it because it's too contentious, then I think we've at least done the survey. We know it's contentious and we need to do a process that is going to be longer. But I just don't feel like we can just sort of shelve it and not do anything about it, given where we are right now with just the energy around it.
Thank you. Mr. Irish?
Last question. I know the 121 participant survey that you mentioned that was recent, that was coupled with other issues that didn't, so it was a more exhaustive survey.
But yeah, that was the only question about the school start and end times. There were questions about the calendar, that you approved already, just, in terms of, should we have 4 days at the beginning of the school year, things along those lines. So it was shared with us by PA, just so to inform our discussions, but that was the only question that dealt specifically with start and end times. And
I guess my only question is that if we move forward with, which I think we should, trying to get some preliminary information, is will that be the sole subject? And it won't be.
That's right. It'll be around, so, I was just looking at a national survey on this. It asks a lot of questions about the science. It asks a lot of questions about, your current satisfaction with the schedule. What does it help you to do? What is it good for? What is it bad for? And then if we did this instead, would that be better for you in these different, so it basically rehashes those same areas to see to what extent do people move, and it looks at, what do parents say, what do students say, what do staff say, and then it gives you bars that, compare all of those. So I think that that's the direction that we would go in doing something like this. I still have to look to see if we can find the original survey that gave us those comments that I shared and that I will put on board docs, but I don't know what the actual survey was. So,
I'm sorry, I didn't need to look for that, so I apologize. That our archives are not the best. Any further questions or thoughts? Okay. So I want to close out the meeting, and our next meeting is, we're in March already. So Superintendent, I know that during budget season, historically, almost every year, we put our focus into the budget and not into other committee work because it is such a huge undertaking. What is your thinking on that these days?
I think we should keep it on the books and then cancel it if we don't need it.
Okay.
Or if we're too engaged in other things at the time, but
we can tweak at that time.
We have a standing, first Thursday of the month date, and I think at this point we shouldn't, just cancel it for that purpose. But
I just didn't know what you had on the schedule for the budget timeline, etc.
I think all of my already given meetings are in here. So we have that same week that we have the meeting, we have the City Council first reading of the FY22 budget is scheduled for that Monday. We all know that sometimes those get pushed back, or then there's a first reading that then leads to a committee meeting that may preempt, our operations committee meeting. But, at this point, there isn't anything standing on the calendar for that day. So I just assume at this point, keep it there, and then we'll figure out if we need to, if we need to change it. I think, that happens, as you pointed out, and I think it's good for Mr. Irish and Yusuf to know that we wind up with lots of additional meetings that are budget related as we move through the process. And so, it is not unusual for us to cancel some of the other committees that are not finance related.
Thank you. Any further questions or thoughts at this time? Okay.